This is K.M. Weiland, and you are listening to the 265th episode of the Helping Writers Become Authors podcast. I'm still enjoying getting to spend an extra hour or so every day reading and calling it work, since after all it is research. I started out with 3 massive piles of books. I probably overdid it a smidge, but I'm down almost 2.5 piles. Okay, maybe 2.25 piles, but I'm getting close. I'm hoping to finish my research by the end of the year so I can dive right into my historical superhero story set in Regency, England, and called Wayfarer. The latest post in the video series on my blog is What's a Contagonist? Or How to Keep Story Conflict High Without the Antagonist. It explains what a contagonist is and how you can use this important character to augment and contrast your antagonist. To find the post, visit my site at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. And now I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast entitled Story Concept and Story Premise. Do you know the crucial difference? What's up with story concept and story premise? Are they just interchangeable words for the same idea, or are they separate tools with their own important jobs to fulfill? I know you guys picked door number 2 because you're wicked smart like that, but it's a fact. Story concept and story premise are often used interchangeably, which just goes to highlight the rampant confusion about them. So, what's the diff? And why does it even matter? Story fixer Larry Brooks said it as concisely as anybody in his free PDF, Deadly Foes Inner Life. A story about what it was like to be on the Titanic on the night of its sinking, that is not a premise. It is a concept only. So let's take a closer look at how to tell the difference. In the beginning, there weren't any characters. There wasn't any plot. There was just the idea. That is your story concept. You may have heard the movie speak term high concept premise, and note how that differentiates story concept from story premise. A high concept is one that can be easily pitched because it's both simple and unique. Consider these gems. Romeo and Juliet as vampire and werewolf, underworld. A soldier restarts time whenever he dies. The Edge of Tomorrow, or Live, Die, Repeat, or whatever the cool kids are calling it these days. A girl dying of cancer falls in love, The Fault in Our Stars. Concept is just the bare bones of the story, but they're super important bones since they're the foundation of everything to follow. A weak concept may lead to a strong premise eventually, but why start weak? Aim high. And by high, I mean high concept. All of the above stories could conceivably have started with concepts as blasé as these. 2 people fall in love, a man fights aliens, a teenager falls in love. They're not bad ideas, but they're ideas we've all seen a gazillion times, so they're not worthy of much more than a yawn until the author digs down, finds something unique, and turns them into the concepts high enough, unique enough, and interesting enough to actually reach audiences. A story premise is the next step up from a story concept. If the story concept is the bones, then the story premise is the first of the flesh. The premise is where your awesome concept idea starts getting personal. You add characters with goals and fears and motives, and you add plot via the obstacles that are going to arise between the characters and their desires. A premise is about the specifics of people falling in love and fighting wars. The real story always happens between the lines of the concept. To return to Larry Brooks's example, the Titanic is just a fascinating disaster until the author starts focusing on 1 or 2 specific people and the ways in which their lives will intertwine with the tragedy. Band of Brothers is just a docudrama of a historical war until it becomes the story of specific people with specific desires and goals. What's The Hunger Games without Katniss sacrificing herself to save her sister? What's Mistborn and its metal-based magic system without a scrappy orphan struggling to find a reason to fight for a family? Consider Edge of Tomorrow. Its low concept, a man fights aliens, becomes the high concept, a soldier restarts time whenever he dies, which then becomes a premise. After gaining the alien power to restart time whenever he dies, a cowardly futuristic soldier must join forces with the only person who believes him, a skilled female warrior, and die over and over until they can locate and destroy the alien leader. So what does this premise give us, other than a solid logline we can now use for pitching and promo? Protagonist, check, he's a soldier. Specifics about the protagonist, check, he's cowardly and futuristic. Setup, check, he gains the alien power to restart time whenever he dies. Antagonist, check, alien leader. Goal, check, he has to locate and destroy the alien leader. Obstacles and conflict, check, he dies over and over again. And bonus, supporting characters, check, skilled female warrior. In short, we've got a story. Literally, I just told you a 44-word story complete with beginning, middle, and end. Now the fun is fleshing out that premise into a novel. There are a couple reasons why all of this is important. One, terminology matters. Knowing and using the correct terminology makes you look smart. Even better, a conscious understanding of the differences will help you identify and use your story's concept and premise in their correct forms. 2. Concept and premise work better together once you understand them apart. If we're lumping concept and premise together, then we're missing the opportunity to use their unique strengths separately. Concept builds into premise. When we start with a clear idea and transform it into as high a concept as possible, we can then use that concept to build a solid premise. And then we get to use that solid premise as a launch pad for the entire story. The premise sentence is the basis of your outline. In fact, if you so choose, the premise sentence, all by its lonesome, can be your outline. 3. A concept isn't a story. A premise is. This is possibly the most important reason. Too often, authors come up with a great concept and think they've got a story. They run off to write the entire novel, only to come up dry because, whoops, they didn't have a story after all. You don't have a story until you have a premise. Whenever a fabulous concept flashes to life, take the time to flesh it out into a premise. The result will be a brilliant idea transformed into a solid foundation for an awesome story. Thank you for listening to the Wordplay Podcast. To read a transcript of this episode, you can visit my website at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. And be sure to check back again next week.